The sun was sinking low over the Arizona territory when the cowboy first saw her, riding alone along the edge of the cottonwood trees where the river bent like a crooked finger, and from the start something in his chest tightened, not with respect, not with caution, but with the dangerous mix of pride and hunger that had already ruined better men than him. His name was Cole Mercer, a hard rider with a hard past, known in the saloons from Tucson to Tombstone as a man who never backed down and never learned when to stop. And that reputation followed him now like a shadow as he reined his horse and watched the Apache woman dismount, unaware she was being observed. Her movements quiet and precise, her dark hair braided tight, her posture straight with the calm strength of someone raised in a land that punished weakness without mercy. She knelt by the water, filling a clay vessel, and Cole told himself the lie he had learned to repeat whenever he crossed a line, that she was alone, that no one would know, that the world out here belonged to whoever was bold enough to take it, but the land itself seemed to hold its breath. Cicadas falling silent, wind slowing as if warning him that some lines were older than his arrogance. Cole nudged his horse forward, boots creaking, spurs chiming softly, and when she looked up, her eyes were sharp, not fearful, not submissive, but measuring him in the way a warrior measures a threat. And for a moment, just a moment, Cole felt the urge to turn back. Yet pride is louder than instinct, and he tipped his hat with a grin that had won card games and lost lives, speaking words that carried mockery beneath their politeness, words that reduced her presence to something he thought he could own. She answered calmly, her English broken but clear, telling him to leave, telling him he stood on Apache land, telling him once, and that should have been enough. But Cole laughed, dismounted, and stepped closer, crossing the invisible boundary that every frontier story warns you never to cross. What happened next would be told differently depending on who survived. To tell it, some would say he grabbed her arm, others would say he only blocked her path. But the truth lay in her reaction, swift and controlled as she twisted free, eyes flashing not with panic but with fury, her hand already on the small blade at her waist. A blade she did not draw because she did not need to, because this was not a fight she intended to finish alone. Cole staggered back, shocked not by pain, but by resistance, his grin gone, replaced by anger, and he spat words that should never be spoken, threats that echoed louder than gunfire in a land where honor was currency and memory was blood. And then, finally, something in his mind recognized danger, and he mounted his horse and rode away, telling himself he'd won because he was still breathing, not realizing that survival is not the same as escape. The Apache woman stood watching until he disappeared into the dust. Then she knelt, pressed her palm to the earth, and whispered words in her own language, words not of revenge but of record, because among her people nothing was forgotten and nothing went unanswered. That night, under a sky torn open by stars, the fire councils burned in the Chiricahua camps, and the woman, known among her people as Nalin, daughter of the Red Mesa, spoke without raising her voice, recounting what the cowboy had done, what he had said and why it mattered. And the elders listened, faces carved from stone, because this was not about insult alone, it was about precedent, about what would happen if such behavior went unchallenged. And when the last word was spoken, silence fell heavy as judgment. Far away, Cole Mercer drank whiskey in a saloon, boasting louder than necessary, laughing too hard, ignoring the uneasy feeling crawling up his spine, unaware that riders were already being chosen, that war paint was being prepared, that messengers were moving through the night like ghosts, and that by dawn, nearly 200, Apache warriors would be riding with a single purpose, not for slaughter, not for chaos, but for balance. And as the chapter of his life closed with laughter and clinking glasses, another chapter was opening in the dark, one written not in ink but in hoofbeats, steel and consequence. So if you feel that tension tightening right now, if you sense the storm forming just beyond the horizon, stay with this story, because what comes next will change everything, and if you want more, Powerful frontier tales like this. Stories where every choice has a price and every legend is paid for in full. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because Chapter 2 is where the reckoning begins. The morning came too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against the ears and makes even a hardened man uneasy. And Cole Mercer felt it before he saw it. Stepping out of the boarding house with his gun belt heavy on his hips and a half-formed regret crawling through his chest. Because the street was empty, the saloon door shut, the air thick with dust and warning. Then the sound reached him, low, steady, undeniable hoofbeats, not scattered like travelers, but measured and many, rolling in from the hills like distant thunder. And when the first riders crested the ridge, his blood turned cold. Because they came in formation, nearly 200 Apache warriors moving as one body, faces painted, eyes fixed, rifles and bows ready, not charging, not shouting, but advancing with the terrifying discipline of men who had already decided how this would end. Cole's hand hovered near his revolver, then stopped, because instinct finally spoke louder than pride, telling him there was no fight here, no escape, only judgment. And as the warriors surrounded the town without firing a single shot, the people emerged slowly from their buildings, understanding they were witnesses, not targets. From the front rode an elder, and beside him was Narlin, her presence calm, unbroken, her gaze steady as it settled on Cole. And in that moment he understood the weight of what he had done. Our single act of disrespect had echoed outward into something far larger than himself. The elder spoke plainly, naming the offense, naming the land, naming the truth. And Cole tried to speak, tried to explain, but words sounded small against the silence that followed. And the judgment was not death, not spectacle, but banishment, stripped of horse, stripped of weapons, marked and sent, walking into the desert with nothing but water and memory, a punishment that would follow him longer than any bullet. The warriors turned away as one, leaving the town intact and Cole alone, collapsing to his knees as the reality settled in. And years later, long after the frontier had changed, old-timers would still tell the story of the cowboy who went too far and lived long enough to understand why some lines should never be crossed. So if this story held you, if you felt the power of consequence and the strength of a people who stood together, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable Wild West legends, because the past still has lessons worth hearing.